I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, doing good. I look forward to our conversation today. So, we're
Good.
having a conversation about embracing our differences and embracing our personality differences and brain differences. And I think this is a super important topic. So, let's go
Great.
ahead and jump into it. Jen, I'm going to ask you, you want to introduce yourself first?
Sure. My name is Jen Starkey, and I have been a therapist for a lot of years, about 25 years. And I've really loved working with women and empowering women. And based on my own journey personally and my work with women, I've really looked at and learned like the importance and the significance of how impactful it can be to understand ourselves, right? And
Absolutely.
and so I've launched into a coaching business now and want to continue that work with women and really help women connect with themselves and understand themselves in a way that really helps them live their best life in a nutshell. So yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
I love it. Yes, and I also have been a therapist for many years, and I have also started launching my business, but specifically for ADHD and adults with ADHD. And I also find it super important for people to understand how their brain works and understand not only how their ADHD brain works, but also embrace those differences as well. Because that's the first step, I feel like, in just feeling more confident, feeling like your life is less chaotic, etc.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, I know when we talked, the idea of, the little things about us, whether it's how our brain works or our personality type. And once we understand that and can develop some insight around that, it really can take away a lot of the struggle because like you said, we can embrace it
Yeah.
and show up for ourselves with compassion. Yeah.
How do you approach, so the women that you work with, how do you approach helping them just kind of understand the basics of how their personality might be different or how their brain might be different? How do you approach that?
Well, I think, understanding our different personality quirks, the two examples that I'll give, a lot of women that I work with fall into that category of being highly sensitive or being empaths,
Mhm.
which I've always described as being emotionally absorbent. And I think of like the people sometimes are just hardwired that way. So I really feel like it's just we show up in the world this way a lot of times. Right.
Yeah,
And if we understand that about ourselves, we are able to protect our emotional energy and we can navigate relationships in a different way. We understand like what it requires so that we feel we can have the healthiest relationship, right? And then the other example that I give is the idea of being an introvert. And a lot of people tend to think of introverts as just shy, they don't like to socialize, but it's really more about energy, right?
yeah,
So once I kind of learned about this many many years ago, that it's more about how I get get my energy. So as an introvert myself, I call myself a social introvert because I like to be social and I like to go out, but it's more draining for me. So
yeah,
I need my downtime to kind of re-energize and to get back to myself, right? So
absolutely.
understanding that makes a big difference in just the quality of life we can live, right? And I was so fascinated with your expertise in terms of understanding the brain differences as with ADHD.
Yeah,
So
there's so much that I've learned and I'm still learning about things. I can absolutely relate to what you're saying, though, about energy and about we only have so much energy in a day. We have to respect our personality differences, how much energy we use on certain tasks. And specifically for adults with ADHD, like we can churn our wheels really hard because things sometimes organization, time management, there's sometimes those basic executive function skills, they call it, that sometimes just take more energy and work for an adult with ADHD. And so we can use up our energy and zap our energy pretty quickly. And knowing how to replenish that energy and knowing how to take down time instead of harshly pushing ourselves forward and criticizing ourselves. Like, that's something I really find valuable. And I really try to help people with that too, is that, we are human. We only have so much energy in a day. And especially with ADHD, we also have brain chemistry differences. So our brain doesn't create as much dopamine or serotonin or norepinephrine. And so sometimes we have to find ways to replenish those chemicals or do things that help soothe us and energize us and give us motivation, because otherwise we hit that wall of overwhelm, or we hit that stressed out, I have no more energy today kind of place pretty quickly.
Right. And think about like the difference for somebody. I don't know how many clients that you work with that don't necessarily know that they have ADHD, or they're kind of flying under the radar,
Mhm.
and what a difference it can make for them when they get that, that understanding, whether it's, a specific diagnosis or just understanding that that's the way their brain works.
Mhm.
I feel like that lifts so much, sometimes shame. People tend to feel like, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? Or, they just, that what's wrong with me question comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also the emotional sensitivity. Why am I so sensitive? Why am I so upset about certain things? Why do I get so stressed out? What's wrong with me? Yes, exactly like what you said. Those questions come up because we see that maybe we are operating differently from other people.
Yeah.
And I think there's a human bias for us to want to just camouflage or fit in. I think that starts as teenagers. We want to like fit in and not look different so that we can have friends and be connected. But then, yeah, when we notice differences, we're like, uh-oh, I got to hide that. Uh-oh, this is different than those people. I have to pretend. And that's called masking a lot of times in the ADHD and autism world. But I think also it causes anxiety, and it causes really sensitive humans, empathetic, sensitive souls
Mhm.
to feel ashamed.
Yeah.
And oh, I want to break through all that shame. That
Oh,
that causes so much harm in people's lives.
oh, me too. Yes. And just, as you were talking, yeah, that facade that comes up, to
Mhm.
me, like what, and this is where my passion is helping. To me, that's like, you're not connected to yourself then, right? It's that disconnection from self.
Yeah.
And we're out there in the world, we're not connected to ourselves, and we're trying to have relationships with others, and there's this vague, sense of unhappiness, or
Mhm.
frustration, or we're not, we're we're just struggling, right? But we're not really sure why. And
Yeah.
so that's where I think that power is when it's, getting the answers to these questions, and
Mhm.
understanding, maybe the ADHD diagnosis, or the introvert or the empath, or whatever our tendencies are, and understanding that about ourselves, and allows us to connect to ourselves in a
Mhm.
more authentic way, and show up for ourselves with compassion.
Yes.
And that's like, to me, that's the magic. That is everything right there, right? Because if I don't know myself and I'm not connected to myself authentically, how can I connect with others authentically, right?
Mhm.
Like you said, it's just a mask then, there's that facade. So,
Yeah, I've been reading a lot about the term validation and as it relates to just helping people. And if we grow up in environments that tell us that we should be different ways, or you shouldn't be so sensitive, you should just be able to focus, all these shoulds. And like if we're kind of given messages throughout our life that our emotions are not okay, or how we behave or what we're doing is not okay,
right.
that that leads us to not know how to validate ourselves and to not accept ourselves, basically, because we have always heard messages about how we should be different. So I think the real magic comes in is when people find other humans who
Mhm.
are who know how to regulate their own emotions, who are kind and validate each other. Like, oh, you're different. Okay, cool. I like differences. Let's talk about how you're different and how I'm different. And it's okay. We don't have to be the same.
Absolutely.
Um, And I think as coaches and as therapists, we've learned this through our training, but it isn't common knowledge out there. It's kind of
Right.
like learning how to accept ourselves and validate ourselves, that how I'm feeling right in this moment, it's okay. Like,
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so much of like that emotion coaching piece. There's so many clients that I've worked with that um, they don't, yeah, like you said, like it's not common knowledge. And so when you give, you provide some of that opportunity for them to understand and
Mhm.
connect with that, it's sort of, I've had clients say, why didn't I, I wish I had known this earlier, right? It could have saved me years of,
Stressing
pain,
out.
struggle,
Yeah.
or stress, and yeah, we think that, things like emotions or how to, navigate our emotions should be common knowledge, and it really is not at all. So,
Yeah, we've
yeah,
got this complex organ in our head called the brain, and we only understand how to use it about this much, kind of
right,
sometimes.
right. And you and I, with our backgrounds in psychology and counseling, I tell people like I went to school for this and it's still hard, right? Like it's not like just because we have the information, like we are magically, you know, lead these.
Analyzing everything and
Right,
understanding everything like that.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
I'm
still,
still learning.
we are all still learning. And I think that journey in life is, yeah, I think it's just, showing up for ourselves again with compassion and connecting. And like you said, that validation piece,
Mhm.
you know, if we can find the people that feel good to be around, right?
Yeah. Who
Yeah.
accept our differences and love us for who we are. Yeah.
Yes. And we don't have to hide who we are.
Mhm. So
Feel
I think we mentioned two really important things so far. So first, just understanding that our differences exist, like that ADHD brain differences exist, that people who are more emotionally sensitive and empathetic, that exists out there in the world, and understanding that it's okay, trying to navigate, like learning how to navigate within that understanding, and then finding other people who are able to also validate you or understand you, find like-minded individuals or people who have similarities.
right.
Those
Find
are
people.
key.
Yeah.
Yeah. I value groups quite a bit, and not only therapy. So when you're in therapy or coaching, you have one other person that you know is going to be there for you and validate you and accept you and help you embrace who you are. And
Right.
then also groups sometimes can even expand upon that, because it helps you in a group setting know that you're not alone with what you're experiencing. And you also get that validation, acceptance, and kind of embracing who you are.
Absolutely. Yes. It's so powerful to know that we're not alone, that we're not the only ones going through this experience, or
Mhm.
we're struggling in some way. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. With some of the clients that I've worked with, I think that is so valuable. And it's funny, like in our world where we can be connected to people all the time, we still can feel very alone and unaccepted, or just kind of comparing ourselves constantly with other people and things we see on social media. So finding like authentic, true connections, that's something special.
Absolutely. Yes, that self-comparison, I actually posted on that yesterday because, and when I've told clients is we can always find find somebody to compare ourselves to that's like that we feel is worse off or better off, whatever. Like basically comparisons don't matter because we can always compare up or compare down. So just, it doesn't take away from the individual. Um, I think I gave the analogy of like a flower, and if you see one beautiful flower, that's a beautiful flower. And if you see a whole bush of flowers, that's a beautiful garden, right? If you see a whole mountaintop of flowers, that's a beautiful mountaintop full of flowers, right? We, having each of the experiences doesn't take away from the other. So I guess, the idea of comparing, just there's a quote, comparison is the thief of joy. So
Yes.
yeah.
That's a good quote. Yes, it is. And I've heard the term compare and despair. Like when
Yeah.
we start comparing so much, we start just like despairing and having that anxiety that, oh no, I'm not like them.
Yes.
What's wrong with me? Kind of going back to that.
Yeah. Yeah. What's wrong with me? Yeah.
And I like your analogy. Like, if we compare that one flower and say, if that one flower, why isn't it as beautiful as the field of flowers?
Right.
It is still beautiful. Why are you comparing? Both are beautiful.
Right. And
The mountain as well, the mountain of flowers, they're all unique and beautiful in their own ways.
exactly. And the pleasure of our experience with the one flower is only diminished if we're comparing it to, or when we're comparing it to something else, right? But if we take away that comparison, we know our worth. And that's kind of like, coming back to just own your worth, and
Mhm.
let go of those comparisons and just
Mhm.
embrace who you are, right? With that compassion. So,
Yeah. The one thing that I hear from clients is that it's hard to break these habits. So
it
people have habits of being critical, habits of comparing themselves,
is.
habits of feeling less than or not enough because
Absolutely.
of maybe being more sensitive or having ADHD. Um, so that's something that I hear a lot of people. They're like, I can't break this habit.
It's
So
so hard.
how do you approach that? And I know that you've already talked a little bit about like compassion, different things, but how do you approach somebody who would say that I can't change who I am? Like
Mhm.
I I can't change these negative thoughts I'm having.
Yeah. Well, the fancy term is neuroplasticity, right, Amber?
I like that word. Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
word.
The idea that, our brain, just because we have certain habits doesn't mean that we can't change them. It just takes time and practice. It's like developing a new, pathway, right?
Mhm.
And one of the words that or phrases I love to use with clients is accountability with compassion, or compassion with accountability.
Okay.
Because working with a lot of women who are very, they're hard on themselves, or they're high functioning. And a lot of times people who struggle with those kind of thoughts feel like, well, if I don't push myself, if I'm not hard on myself, then I'm just going to go to the other extreme and I'm not going to accomplish anything, and I'm just going to, you know, fizzle out, whatever. And
Be a failure or fizzle
yeah,
out.
be a failure, right? And it doesn't work that way, right? So just, yeah, breaking those habits and kind of understanding the things that really can be getting in our way, right? And without us even recognizing it until somebody kind of says, how is that working for you? To beat yourself up in that way, or whatnot, it's not super helpful. So
No, no. And we need that kind of confrontation sometimes and it's compassionate confrontation of like, what you're doing doesn't seem like it's helping you. How can we help you change that?
right.
And
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
an ADHD perspective, um, so I really try to help people embrace their strengths. And
Hmm.
so there's that urge, like what you were just saying, to keep pushing yourself to do things that it may not be easy for you to do, or push yourself and just have unrealistic emotional expectations or energy expectations.
Definitely.
And so I really try to push also that within ADHD, it's not just challenges all the time, but there are like really beautiful strengths with having an ADHD brain, like
Yeah.
super creative. You can come up with lots of ideas. Usually these people are very compassionate and loving and sensitive souls as well. And so that is a beautiful quality. And, if there is some creative outlet that people enjoy, art, music, etc., okay, let's build on those strengths so that you can feel a sense of competency and like you can feel proud of yourself. And it's not something where you're constantly pushing yourself angrily forward. It's something
Right.
that you enjoy.
Right.
Um, so I really love focusing on just what are your strengths? How can we work with those strengths?
Right.
Let me teach you about your brain. Let me help you understand and embrace who you are, and then keep building on those strengths.
Absolutely. I think another quick tip is like talking to clients about how would you phrase this to a friend or to a child, like that inner dialogue. If I wouldn't say it something to, my child or my best friend or, family member in this way, why would I talk to myself in that way? That compassion piece of just embracing that, because, it just, we can hold ourselves accountable with compassion, just like we do other people. Right.
Yeah,
And
I haven't heard that term, compassion accountability. I like that. It's something I learned today.
yeah, yeah.
Both of us are doing great work. And if people want to learn more about us individually, Jen, do you want to talk about how can somebody reach you and
Sure.
find you for coaching, or what kind of offers do you have?
Sure, absolutely. So my business is Willful Joy. You can find me on Facebook, Jennifer Starkey LLC, Willful Joy Coaching and Consulting. That would probably be the best way to reach me. And my website is willfuljoy.com. So
I like that. Willful joy.
Willful Joy.
Yes.
And or how can people reach you?
Yeah, I have a website. It is readyandfocused.com. And I'm also on the Facebook and Instagrams as Ready and Focused ADHD Coach. So yeah, I hope that, this conversation today about just embracing our differences, and then also just learning about how we approach, the idea of differences. I hope this can be helpful to somebody out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Amber, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jennifer. Take care.